Welcome, everyone.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. It's good to get updated with everyone, and we're so glad you're all here today on this sunny spring day in March. My name is Beth Davis. I'm the co-chair of the Southern Piedmont Chapter of the North Carolina Native Plant Society with Lisa Tompkins, and we're just really grateful for people taking a time out and to hear our wonderful program today. We are also very grateful to the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens for co-hosting with us today. So Laura, if you'll advance the slide here.
All right, so for those of you that are not familiar with the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens, I want to welcome you to visit at any time. We're on the campus of UNC Charlotte, and we are delighted to be co-hosts for these monthly events. We have 7 of our 10 acres of outdoor gardens are in primarily native woodland, and we have a fantastic wildflower display that is starting to pop it started, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, and is just continuing to develop as the season progresses. I wanted to mention that we have lots of classes upcoming, including a wildflower ID class, sustainable gardening class, woody plant selections with Dr. Mellichamp, and bird ID, and all kinds of other things. And then we'll be releasing the second half of our year's worth of classes in probably May.
So now we'll switch over to today's talk. And we are very fortunate to have Laura Domingo with us today. She is a naturalist at Reedy Creek Nature Center, and she has given programs with us, and we have been on walks with her before, and she knows so many things about ecology and botany and wildlife, and we always enjoy having an opportunity to hear from Laura. And this year, as we were thinking about what we would want to hear, everyone wants to be outside now that it's finally getting warm and we're feeling a little more comfortable. And so she's going to tell us about her top 10 favorite wildflower hikes in this season. And she's been gracious enough to spread them around. So no matter where you live, in theory, you'll be able to find one near you. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. And thank you, Laura, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Now I can't see myself on the video, so everything look okay? I'm centered.
You're looking good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm tickled to be here. So I am a naturalist with Mecklenburg County. This month marks my 14th year with the county. And so I've done a little hiking in the region, and it's really hard when Beth said my 10 favorite. There's so many that are left out of this talk because it would have been a few hour talk if I put in all my favorites. And as Beth said, what I tried to do is make it so that there are some, on the west side of Charlotte or a little bit outside, north, south, and east, so that wherever you are, you can have something close to you, hopefully, out of one of these. But I certainly left out some favorites like Latta Preserve, Fisher Farm, UNCC. There's a bunch that aren't in here. So it's not that they're not lovely. They just didn't make the cut for this one. So the idea for this talk is kind of a teaser. So I'm gonna, show you the hikes that I have. There's gonna be a link in the chat that Beth is gonna put for each hike that I talk about. And I'm gonna have a map or a trail picture, and then just a few of the wildflowers you might find. So this is in no way supposed to be a wildflower ID hike. If you're interested in wildflower ID, then sign up either for the UNCC class that they're doing, or you can sign up for one of our hikes. We, as Beth was saying, we also felt like, everybody's wanting to get out. We're still being mindful of smaller groups, but it's been a little chaotic this year, to say the least. And so, getting out there in the wildflowers is definitely a way that we can be very therapeutic for us. So this is one of my favorite quotes. no matter how chaotic it is, wildflowers will still spring up in the middle of nowhere. And that's Sheryl Crow. So here we go. Let me tell you a little bit about me, really kind of just specifically having to do with this talk. So here on the left side, this is me leading a group of people on a hike, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I'm very blessed that I get to do this as a job. And when I moved here 14 years ago, I kind of had to learn the lay of the land. I grew up in Florida and went to school in Utah, and my degree's in zoology, and I was very focused on wildlife and looking at critters. And I'd take people on walks, and sometimes we'd get this middle picture here, and we'd have somebody come into the middle of the trail, and we'd see some good wildlife on some hikes. But some hikes, as you know, you get a group of people together and the wildlife can hear you coming a mile away. And I realized that I needed a few more tools in my pocket, and I should probably start learning a little bit about the plants that were around. And I never had a chance in school to take a botany class. So I started everything that I know about plants here about 14 years ago. And so I learned a little bit about pointing at flowers and telling people about flowers. And lo and behold, look at this. The group loves it just as much as seeing the wildlife. So my journey began with that in our first hike that we're going to talk about, Reedy Creek Nature Preserve. I'm fortunate that we actually have an herbarium there, and we have some wonderful botanists. And so I was able to go in there and bother them probably way too much than I should have. What's this? What's this? So it was a nice place to start. So Reedy Creek Nature Preserve, if I was just to stop and think about it on its own, it probably wouldn't be like, this is the best place to go and see all the wildflowers, but it's where my office is. And so I had to include it, of course. And as I've been there over the last 14 years, I've seen a lot of transitions and with the wildflower populations, and a lot of really neat stuff coming in as the forest matures there. So Beth should be putting a link for parkandrec.com. The first 3 hikes I have are our properties. And we also on that link, it talks about the trails, but we have a new interactive map where you can go in and put in either the name of a preserve, and it will actually let you zoom in and look at trails and find some more information. So Reedy Creek Nature Preserve is 832 acres, and how exciting is it that we're getting ready to add another 100 acres? That just, as most of you know, if you're in the Charlotte area, that's pretty miraculous, doesn't happen often. Right now there's over 6 miles of trails, and I'm talking just about the preserve. So we are unique in that this upper part here is a park, and there's 136 acres up there in the park. But back in the nature preserve, we have 6 miles of trails, including one that goes to a historical site, the Robinson Rock House. We have a nature center, and as I mentioned, the Dr. James F. Matthews Center for Biodiversity Studies, which houses our herbarium, and that's a pretty neat place if you haven't visited that. So all of Reedy Creek has been designated as what used to be called a significant natural heritage area. And unfortunately, they've changed that to just say natural area. But at the time that they made that designation, it was very significant. And the headwaters of Reedy Creek are among some of the highest quality surfaces in Mecklenburg County. And we have just done a stream restoration there too. So the trail I want to talk about, one of my favorites is Umbrella Tree Trail, and it is named after this umbrella magnolia tree. So down here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's a picture of the leaves. Obviously, this was taken a little bit more in the summer, late spring, summer, and the leaves are kind of resemble an umbrella is where it got its name. It's a lovely magnolia, blooms in April, and I put that really generically because I heard some people talking earlier, everything is late this year, and it's really hard over the last several years with changes in climate to kind of pinpoint when things are blooming, but usually about the second week of April, I see these. This is one of my favorite areas, nice little rich cove on the Umbrella Trail. And these are some of the flowers that I have seen over the years here. And one of the things I think about, at least in these first three, and the names are here, I might not go through every single one, but some of these are pretty common. And I've always thought about that. Of course, we want to advocate, save, the special, endangered, unique flowers, but I'm a kind of a cheerleader for keeping the common plants common. How many things are there that we used to be common that aren't anymore? So these are sprinkled throughout. This bellwort is perforated bellwort is one of my favorites, and historically was used by Native Americans for a lot of greens. They would eat the leaves on those. So I have been at Reedy Creek for 14 years. Probably the first 10 years, I never saw this Striax americanus, this American or big leaf snowbell. It's a nice little shrub. So I forgot to mention, I'm going to talk a little bit about both, ephemerals. There'll be some shrubs and maybe even small trees in this talk. So I include everything in the wildflowers. But I watched that same trail for 10 years until one day I looked up and whoa, there it was. And we have quite a population of those. And then I did want to mention that this one over here, this pink lady slipper, is one that I have actually just found 2 years ago on our property. We knew of a population next door on that 100-acre property that we're buying, or the city's buying, and we're going to manage. But we were out there. I was out there with Dr. Matthews, James Matthews, looking at the population, and I just said to myself, you know what, we've got some places in our boundary that look similar to this habitat, and went out and found those. Unfortunately, that one's not right off the trail, but I do have one of our pop-up hikes is there at Reedy Creek. So if you're interested, I can take you a little bit off trail and we can find that together. Now, Beth, if there's any questions, and y'all feel free, this is casual. If you want to pop in and ask a question, Beth, you're gonna have to let me know because I'm definitely not, can't see the chat on here. So Mcdowell Nature Preserve is the next one I want to talk about in the Chestnut Trail, which is this little one right here that you're going to see a theme throughout this talk that is right near a nice creek in a little cove area. Mcdowell Nature Preserve has over 1,000 acres. It's on Lake Wylie. There's lots of boat ramps and chances to be on the water. There's a nature center and a campground, and we manage a 150-acre Piedmont prairie restoration site there. These are some of the lovely wildflowers. Now, this Chestnut Trail really is a treasure. There's a lot of, surprisingly, because this is down towards South Carolina, there's a lot of elevation there. And so I see a lot of good plants that I might see in the foothills or the mountains. So early saxifrage, bloodroot, which back in the day was used for a lot of ornamental war paints, because it is aptly named. The root has a reddish color that they would use for dye. And then trillium, and this is actually the same species here, the cat species trillium. It just did a little bit of variant in the colors. The next one is Buckeye Cove. And this used to be called Stevens Road. So what happened was we opened a nature center and nature preserve called Stevens Creek. And we felt like it was a little confusing to have two Stevens in two different areas in the county. So we just renamed this Buckeye Cove. So a lot of people are still referring to it as Stevens Road. It is up near, if you're familiar with the area, it's in the northern part of the county, near just down the road from Cowan's Wildlife Refuge and Latta Plantation, or I'm sorry, Latta Preserve. It's about 352 acres along the Catawba River, really high quality wetlands there. And most of you probably know, Catawba River, the Mountain Island Lake is where a lot of people in Mecklenburg get their drinking water. So important area to protect. We actually just did a burn. It is burn season right now, so prescribed fire. We just did a burn on 3/9 and we burned about 50 acres, and that acreage was burned up here in this section. And one thing to note about this preserve, the other two I mentioned have large parking lots. This is kind of more of a neighborhood preserve, so there is a very small parking area just off the road that can fit well, it depends on how much you sandwich them in there, 6 to 10 cars. So just if you're going to meet friends out there, that's something good to know. It's really hard for me when I go out here to choose trails, but I would say that for wildflowers, you definitely want to get into these cove areas. And right here, is a really nice, rich area right there off the water. And also let you know that I mostly do hikes here, and I don't know why this has happened over the years in the fall. For some reason, this preserve has just drawn me in the fall. So my knowledge of all the wildflowers there isn't as extensive as some other places. Beth, was there a question?
Yeah, I did have one question.
Yeah, please.
So people were wondering if, when you're talking about lengths of trail, are you talking about a circle trail or just an out and back?
Okay, so the first two that I mentioned are both loop trails. So I think the Chestnut was 1.1 miles and the Umbrella is just under a mile. Yeah, so those are loops, and I'll specify that because some of the hikes are out and back, so I will specify that. So the preserve here, Buckeye Cove, has some more of the common flowers that we're used to seeing here in the spring. Wild geranium is one of my favorites. I think it's a really underappreciated flower, and traditionally that one, kind of just a little tidbit, the root was used by Native Americans for an oral astringent. And I know that this one is not a flower, but one of my favorite ferns, maidenhair fern, and I just don't see it that often in Mecklenburg County. So I wanted to point out that there's just some really rich covelands that have wonderful, very large patches of this maidenhair fern, which is nice. So this picture here, I want to say, is the only one in this presentation that is not mine. Over the past year and a half, 2 years, we have changed my computer and at work a couple of times, and I've lost some pictures. So unfortunately lost some great pictures of this wonderful, wonderful Greenway. So the Broad River Greenway is in Cleveland County, about 1,500 acres and about 20 miles of trails. As you can see, this is what I usually take is this river trail here. And I believe it's a couple miles. And that one I think is 2 miles up. So we'd be about 4 coming back. And as you see, it's got this wonderful path. There's some nice patches of switch cane here. And I see mountain laurel along the edges, baptisia, seen lead plant, a lot of wonderful things that I don't have pictures of because I lost them, but I have a few. There's some upland trails here as well. And obviously with 20 miles, you can just go wild. They do a few races. There is horseback riding, so just things to be aware of when you're there on the trail. And then for non-county residents, there is a $5 charge per person. So not per car, but per person. But well worth it, I think, to make the journey there. So this is the one that I did. It is a little bit more on the outskirts of the Charlotte area, but it's about an hour away. So it's not too far. I put that date on there, March 28th, and it's also a reminder for me to tell you that no matter how familiar you are with a hike or a place, always check the websites. So on March 28th, they are having an Easter egg hunt. So you may not want to visit on that day. Always good to have that information. So the really special thing about this, it has, wonderful patches of mayapple and trillium, sweet shrub. I had dwarf pawpaw. But one day I was out and I was actually scouting. So I was by myself before I led a hike there. And at the end of the hike, I sat down on a rock and took my shoes off and put my feet in the river and looked down next to me and said, "What is a sundew doing here?" Like it just really seemed out of place to me. And to be there in this area, I know that in our mountain bogs, we have sundews, we have them in the Sandhills and the coast. And this is its bloom here on the right-hand side. And so I took my pictures back to the herbarium at my office, and lo and behold, this is a newly found disjunct population of sundews. So I believe it's been a while. This has been a few years, but I believe it's 100 miles disjunct from any other populations that they know of. So just kind of a neat thing to always keep your eyes open and trust your instinct in your gut when you're like, why is this here? All right, now we're gonna get, this is really got to be one of my favorites. And mostly I want to say that I have a couple challenges for you in this presentation that we'll get to at the end. But one of them I'll talk to you right now, and that is finding a place that is your place. Finding somewhere that you can go to on a regular basis, see the changes that happen, get that sense of place. There's nothing like it. And for me, Buffalo Creek Preserve happens to be really close to my house. I fell in love with it when I first went there. It's a Catawba Lands Conservancy property, and it has a savanna, which actually that was just burned, about 16 acres on March 9th as well. It is, as you guys know, it's been really wet. And so this past week and a half, 2 weeks that we've had dry, it just, all the people that do prescribed fire have been in heaven. So there's been a lot of burning going on. So they just did that burn. The trail is 2.1 miles. That is one direction. So you're looking at 4.2 coming back. This is about 393 acres. And this is one that I'm leading a hike Friday. This coming up Friday, I'll be doing a hike there for the Native Plant Society. This trail on the right, and it's kind of hard to see, it's really hard to get the context of this, but if you see little white dots everywhere, that's what the trails look like with wildflowers. They are just dotted with, these are probably mostly spring beauties that I took there. This is a little map of the trail, and there is a little fun suspension bridge here. This is where the trailhead is. You do get into some farmlands, which is also part of the property, but the trail doesn't go through it. But they are farmed and managed with best practices through the Lands Conservancy contracts that they have with local farmers. And there is also, I'm going to back up because I don't want you to ooh and ah at those flowers quite yet. There is also a heron rookery on this area where I've had the most 5 or 6 heron nests. Unfortunately, that's not right near a trail, but I could maybe get you backstage passes. So for me, this, once you get, so it's about a mile, a little bit over a mile to get into where the wildflowers are for the spring. So the savanna, obviously the more of the interest there is in the fall with some of the flowers. But when you get through that mile and you get into the woods, it is just lovely with these Sweet Betsy, little Sweet Betsy trilliums everywhere. The trout, and see, I tried, it doesn't work. The trout lilies just blanket the whole side of the trail, and it's impossible to get that in picture. And then this threadleaf toothwort, which I really don't see very often at all, is nicely sprinkled throughout, as well as many others. So if you're not aware of it, the trout lily is also called dogtooth lily. And so a couple weeks ago, I did a hike and actually pulled a root up for educational purposes. I don't do that often, but it is neat to show people, and it looks a little bit like a canine tooth, like a dog tooth. Those leaves have been historically edible. Peoples in the past have eaten these trout lily leaves and then also chewed on them and spit them into a river or a water area to supposedly attract fish. Because another dimpled trout lily, it's supposed to resemble trout skin. All right. So next is in Rowan County, town of Landis. I lived down the street from this preserve for a little bit over a decade, drove by it quite often and had no clue it was there. It is only 98 acres. But it really does feel more like a wilderness area, and that's what they have called it. Then I just found out about it because there was a sign on the road that talked about it, and went there, and it's been a favorite ever since. There's over 5 miles of hiking trails. My dog did get into this picture. It's the only one I could find of the trail, but there's a trail that runs along the lake here. There's, as you can see, 2 lakes, and then it also goes up a little bit into the woodlands. There's lots of recreation amenities. So when I first found this park, It was really just trails. There were a lot of people fishing. It is across the street from a YMCA and a library. So it got a little bit of traffic, but since then they put in disc golf. They have a couple of camping cabins. You can camp there. There's a little area that was quarried out that they've turned into a camp area. And there's also kayaks that you can take out on the lake. And this hike, this preserve was the first time I had ever seen fairy wand in the wild. So it's lovely. There's a little small patch of it, also sometimes called devil's bit. Nice pink sturgs, bloom azaleas along, and then the largest areas of maple leaf viburnum that I've ever seen. These are just blooming throughout the entire kind of upland slope area, which is really nice. I can't speak, 40-acre rock heritage preserve. I was so privileged to be able to go with two rock star botanists, Catherine Luckenball, who's not with us anymore, used to work for us, and then Dr. James Matthews. And he spent a lot of his younger years studying some plants out here. So it was really a treat to go there. It is in Lancaster County, but it is only, of course, depending on where you are in Charlotte, but 45, 50-minute drive. It's large. I actually didn't realize until I was looking up, I'm not one to keep numbers in my head very well, but 2,965 acres, but it has about 4 miles of trails. So you really don't see, you know, a lot of the preserve, which in some ways is a little bit okay, because there really have a lot of use there that's getting into some graffiti and some stuff that's kind of not wanted. So you can see a little bit of the graffiti here on the rock. So the usage is kind of weighing on them pretty hard. The rock's actually 14 acres, and I do not know why it was named 40-acre rock. But there are some special plants that bloom here. One of my favorites is elf orpine, this pink. I mean, how could you not? Isn't that just the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen? And if anybody's into, it's in the stonecrop family, if anybody's into the succulent plants, even before they bloom, they're just so neat looking in those pools. Not pictured here is also pool sprite. I've actually not been there when it's been in bloom, but that is one that is threatened. And a very small flower only blooms, or I'm sorry, only can be found in South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama. So it's pretty special. The neat thing too about this preserve, I want to go back and mention, is that so there's a couple parking areas there. You know, you walk, you've got this 40-acre rock. When you're coming through here, there's actually a little cave. There's a little waterfall. You walk along a stream, and then you can come down here and get into this huge beaver pond. So it's really got a lot of different areas, different types of habitats. And here's a golden Alexander that I found there. So next is Boone's Cave Park. This is up in Davidson County. Again, another fairly small one, 100 acres, 100 plus acres, about 7.5 miles of trails. Local legend, and they do not have any actually proof of this, but is that the Boone family spent a year or so in North Carolina, and they think it was at or near here. I put up these 3 shots of the preserve because it shows you the diversity. So they've got this trail here that feels sometimes like you're in the mountains. It can get pretty steep at times. Of course, the cave is there, which is really nice. And then they've got these, you know, wetlands. Obviously, this was in the summer with the lizard's tails blooming. There have been over 100 native wildflowers documented here. So it is a special place to go. And there's also this is Cottonwood Trail here. At the end of that Cottonwood Trail, there's a treasure tree, which I think is a topic we're going to have, we're going to cover here with the Native Plant Society in a little while. It's along the Yadkin River. There are kayak put-ins. Look at these trails. I mean, it's a small place, but they definitely have a lot of trails weaving in and out. They have just put in a disc golf course. That's what this is. So that's kind of a new thing that a lot of people are doing. But it is just a lovely little area. And It has a few mountain plants, or plants that you would see more towards the mountains, like the laurel, rue anemone, some, wonderful dwarf crested irises. These are just naming a few. I've seen blue star there, which is a nice one. And then Antonaria, placitos in their drier, rockier areas. South Fork Trail, and I'm gonna, in all honesty, tell you I've only been here a couple of times, but when I was kind of trying to piece this out, I wanted to make sure that I gave people over on the west side another option. The times that I have been there, it is just a wonderful walk. I have heard recently that they're also getting a lot of wear and tear on that trail, like over usage. It's really, I guess everywhere is like that right now with everybody wanting to be outside. It's in Gaston County, Carolina Thread Trail. The neat thing about it is it's surrounded by the Far Yarns Preserve, about 94, almost 95 acres. And on that preserve, you can find the big leaf magnolia. So actually at the end of this trail, there's a couple spots where you may get to see that, which is pretty neat. So it's 2 miles one way. There's a little trail that I grabbed off of the Catawba Lands Conservancy page, or Carolina Thread Trail page. And here's a few highlights. Spring beauties. This is one that's traditionally too was a food plant for people. You can actually eat every part of that plant. Foam flowers along the edges of the creeks near the river, and then false Solomon seal, or Solomon's plume, has been found there. And then finally, Carolina Sandhills Wildlife Refuge. So this is one that I stretched out. I reached out a little bit. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. So I know it's a little bit longer, but how can you be this close and not mention the Carolina Wildlife Refuge? We could definitely spend a whole hour talking just about the plants and the preserve here. It's in Chesterfield County, South Carolina, 47,000 acres. Definitely a premier site for longleaf wiregrass ecosystem. The nice thing about this, and if I put up the actual map of the preserve with all the roads, you would be really overwhelmed. There are extensive roads that you can drive along, but there's also a wildlife drive that's paved that you could drive along. There are trails. This right here is showing one of the trails walking through the system. I think you can do up to one, that the longest one, Tate's Trail, I think is around 7 miles. But then there's other places that you just park and walk to. And that's usually how I do this preserve. I just go to a place, walk around a little bit, go to the lakes, go to, little nooks and crannies, and find so many special things here. I also put this picture to remind me, as I said, it is burn season. They actually burn through June. So just keep that in mind, check websites before you take off to go to some of these places. These are there. I could have, again, filled up 20 slides with the special flowers that are found in the Sandhills, but these are just 3 of my favorites. Pixie moss is actually blooming right now. I think it's peaking or has peaked right now. So it's a really early bloomer. And just a lovely little plant that I believe it's definitely threatened, and I believe it's endangered status. The Sandhills lupine is lovely, and it's just patches and patches of it, typically in the pine needles with turkey oaks all around. So that's a special treat to see, and that's usually May is so I had the privilege of going out with Will, and he definitely says, May is one of the favorite times to go out and see the most amount of wildflowers, but there's interest at all times of the year. There's pitcher plants. I only showed one yellow pitcher plant, but there's definitely a few different species that you can find out there. If you haven't been there, got to do yourself a favor and get out there. So another favorite quote, the amen of nature is always a flower. Isn't that nice? Oliver Wendell Holmes. This is a lovely little bluet, and I didn't want to leave it out because it's so overlooked, but it's, one of the early spring flowers. It's just so tiny on the edge of the trails, usually growing in the moss. You'll probably find this at every single hike that I mentioned. There's definitely lots of overlap with the flowers that I mentioned. And this one, interestingly enough, historically was used by Native Americans. They would make a tea out of it for bedwetting, which is a funny thing if you think about it. I would do that if I drank tea before I went to bed, but apparently it has some medicinal properties for that not to happen. Before I go into the challenges, definitely want to remind everybody, although I know I usually don't have to with a group like this, but they're, respecting the wildflowers, leaving them for future generations. Typically if you even go to pull wildflowers, they're not often successful, even if you do try to transplant them. The exception being if we're doing a plant save or something and there's no other option, but definitely want to take photos and just memories out of these places. And with that being said, we have a couple of challenges for you. So one of them that I want to mention is a city nature challenge. And this goes perfectly with what I was just talking about with photos. And this is happening from April 30th through May 3rd. This is Charlotte Metro City Nature Challenge. So I kind of put up some pertinent information here. I put up the iNaturalist site. So iNaturalist, you can go on and make an account. You can go on to your phone and download the app. It's really easy. And we talked about doing a couple of different trainings with iNaturalist, but why recreate the wheel? They have so many tutorial videos on their site that take you through absolutely everything you could want to know. That being said, I included my email address. I'm kind of coordinating this for the Charlotte metro area. So I'm certainly here to answer any questions about that. So the important things off this flyer, so you don't have to squint your eyes to read it, is the dates. And it's pretty widespread. So it's Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, Gaston, Airedale, Stanley, Union, and York. It was Rowan last year, but I think the Foothills are trying to take Rowan from us. So this is a competitive challenge. It started with California. I think it was San Diego and LA started the first kind of challenge together. And it is now international. And people are participating from, Bahamas and Africa and Asia. And unfortunately, they usually really beat us with the amount of species that they get. It's kind of not fair, but we're going to give them a run. So if you're interested, this can be done in your backyard. You don't have to go anywhere, but we're just trying to encourage people and get them to just go out. You take a picture. Again, those tutorials will bring you through this, but you then can just upload the picture then or later. And what it does too is it gives you ideas about what it could be. So it will give you like top 10 of this could be. It's getting pretty good at identifying stuff. It's right a lot of times, but you don't always want to, take what they say. You want to go back and look in the books, and but it's a neat little tool. So the second challenge I have for you is to try and at least pick 2 out of the 10 hikes that we mentioned and do those between now and May. And I don't know if Beth has already done so, or she may be doing it as we speak. And I am not a technological person, so somebody else may be able to explain this better, but we're asking you to do this challenge and then to do the hashtag that Beth is putting in for the pictures you take. So if we do that, we can all share what we're seeing, the different wildflowers at different times, different things about the trails. And that also you can do this on your own, but as we mentioned before, we are doing some pop-up wildflower hikes. And so those I think have already been advertised, and maybe I'll kind of nudge Beth right now and she can speak a little bit more to that.
Yes, so the hashtags will just allow us to see what everybody else is seeing when you tag your pictures either on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And the idea for this was to not only offer some hikes where we could go with a a botanist or a naturalist, but also to go on your own, explore, and then share. And now on our chat, if there are other favorite wildlife hikes around that you thought of that Laura's missed, because we made her do top 10, not top 400. So
Yes.
if anybody else has any to add, please do in the chat so we can all know. But yeah, the idea was just to celebrate spring with photos and locations and talk about it amongst ourselves and social media. So Laura, I did have a question on the iNaturalist challenge. So
yes.
when you talk about the competition, how will we see that? How many people are posting from each region?
So what it is, and I thought I had given you that link, and if I didn't, I can get it for you. But you can also find it by going into the iNaturalist page. But we have a project page. It is on this flyer here. So it's inaturalist.org/ if you see it there, Project City Nature Challenge. So what you do is you sign up as a participant in that project. And then any picture you take between those 4 days will be, and you upload it, will be counted as part of that challenge. So again, the challenge is April 30th through May 3rd. And then from May 4th through May 8th, some of the internal people are going to be working on identifying. So one of the things with iNaturalist is there's a lot of experts on there. So you upload a picture and it just sits there, and then maybe you uploaded a picture of, I was going to say grass, but that's a bad example because there's not a lot of grass experts. I have one still sitting there waiting for ID. You upload a picture of a wildflower. There's somebody on there that is going to almost second your, yeah, that looks good. I think that is a, Sweet Betsy, little Sweet Betsy, Trillium. And then maybe you'll get one more person to agree. And when you get to that point, it becomes research grade identification. So we're going to be taking all of the pictures that everybody's doing and going to be, checking IDs and making sure things are correct. But the people that organize this, which is the Natural Museum out in California, they are the ones that are tallying everybody. So they have all these project pages, and you can go on iNaturalist right now and look at City Nature Challenge, and you can see who signed up for this year, because they cut it off pretty early. So it's already cut off for what countries and cities are going to participate. So you can look through the list and see who's participating right now. And then, they get that week after to kind of figure out, how many species and how many observations. Those are the two things that they do the challenge based on, and how many people are participating, how many observations, and how many species are found.
So the important thing is for us to not only use the iNaturalist app, but to go in and participate in our project.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That was the part that I didn't understand. There was a question off the top of your head on the trails that were mentioned. Do you remember if any of them had boardwalks other than, I think, the Boone? Was it the Boone Trail?
Boone has a boardwalk. Other than that, that's all I can think of. Yep.
On the ones that were on here.
Yeah, the other ones have little small bridges, but yeah, no boardwalks.
And it looked like your trails ranged in accessibility from flat to, and a lot of these stream coves might have a little bit of challenge in terms of not flat.
Correct. Yeah, they're, mostly, and especially the ones, Broad River Greenway along the river is going to be pretty flat, unless you want to go into the upland area, then you're going to get into more, the ones that are in our county are, it's Piedmont elevation. So, it's not terribly challenging, but not flat either. Obviously the Sandhills is going to be your flattest. And I really think the Sandhills does have a lot to offer with just being, as far as accessible, with being able to do the wildlife drive and, park somewhere and just, walk a half mile to look at stuff, get back in your car, go to another area. So it's kind of a nice way to do that.
No, that's really great that you challenged us
Yes.
to do the Sandhills. So we have
Yes.
a couple of more questions.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Do you have any Uwharrie area favorite trails that you
Oh gosh.
recommend?
So many. I love the Uwharries, also very close to my house. I live in Concord. So I just did a hike from Jumping Off Rock parking area up to Little Long Mountain. And that's just gorgeous. That is, I mean, going up to Little Long Mountain is a little bit of an uphill challenge. There is another parking lot on the other side, the Moffett Trailhead, that can get you to the top of that mountain quicker. That has some rock outcrops that are really unique with some, very wet pockets. And then it also has it's so much prickly pear cactus and just some really unique, sunny areas there on the top of the mountain. Of course, along the stream as you're going up on that trail. And these are all, the Uwharrie Trail runs now 40 miles through. And so there's little side treks you can do, but for the most part, when I talk about the Uwharries, it's that main trail, Uwharrie Trail. Along the creeks there is just lovely. There's a lot of mountain laurel, and I actually, in walking there just a couple of weeks ago, and there wasn't much out. We had some we had hepatica, anemone americana, and trout lilies just starting. I think that's all we saw that day. But the mountain laurel is going to be, I have to go back, probably April. It's going to be lovely. They did just open a new trailhead at Walker Creek, and I have not been to that yet. So that's supposed to be really nice along the creek. And then I really enjoy Baden Lake. There's I think it's 5.6 mile loop around the lake. At one section, it does go up into the uplands a little bit, but there's some nice things along the lake there.
One person asked us, would any of the trails stand out as a good trail to take a 4 or 5-year-old?
Well, I think all of them. I mean, really, but I'm trying to think in length. I mean, I think honestly, well, Reedy Creek is just awesome. First off, the trail is pretty easy to do, and I think that we have a play area there for kids. So
That's so
nice
true.
because you can say, "Hey, come on a walk with mom and dad," and then we'll get to the play area. Right? You can convince them to be on the trail for a mile or so. Yeah, I mean, and also the Broad River Greenway, because it's pretty flat, and then you can also carefully stick your feet in the water and splash around at the edges. I say carefully because Broad River gets running pretty fast, so that's kind of a nice.
I always see a lot of kids at the Chestnut Trail in Mcdowell Park too.
Yeah, and I really haven't.
But
yeah.
So
I spent that much time down there, so I've only been down there a couple times.
And review again the Wildlife Drive. I believe that was in the Sandhills.
It is in the Sandhills, yes. And so they have wonderful brochure, and that brochure has the map, and I mean their website is wonderful too. It's Wildlife Refuge federal website, so they've done a great job. You can download the brochure there, and you can drive to they have different spots to park at where you can walk to an overlook, or or maybe they might have a trail that's a half mile or so. And the wildflowers are incredible, but keep in mind there is also the endangered red cockaded woodpecker, which is really wonderful to see there. I see that there quite a bit.
So just to remind everybody, if we did put links to all of the websites that match each of the trails that Laura mentioned in the chat, and we've also been talking about in the chat, but just to remind everybody, we're offering 7 hikes by Native Plant Society members to some of the areas that you mentioned throughout the spring, and those are on our website chapter page on ncwildflower.org. We have a sign up genius so that you can sign up for each one, because we are trying to be very careful and limit the number of people, and with one guide, just just to be careful because of COVID. So you'll find those on there, and we're just so grateful to our volunteer guides who are taking us out and will help us find wildflowers this spring. So Laura, thank you. This has been,
Yes.
we just can't wait to get outside and visit all of these places. And I know we're going to have some superstars who go visit all 10 of your hikes. Two is just such a low number for us to do for a challenge. So
I know I was going to do all 10, but then I was just trying to keep in mind people's.
No. It's wonderful. And we'll also join forces in the iNaturalist City Nature Challenge as well. So
wonderful.
I'm going to, it's about time for us to sign off, but I am going to put in the link I know in addition to being outside hiking, we're also probably all staring at our own home gardens, whether it's a potted plant on the deck or a big backyard. But Amy mentioned that the botanical garden has their plant sale coming up, and sometimes it's intimidating to try to figure out what to buy. So we've had Dr. Mellichamp and Paula Gross speak to our group before, and the botanical garden is still selling their books. And if you want to do research on plants, of course, there's plenty of things on the web, but sometimes it's fun to have the book in your lap. So I'm going to put the link up there for ordering those books from the botanical garden if you want to do that. So that's an opportunity. And if at the very least, and somebody did ask about 4 and 5-year-olds, Amy is leading one of our hikes in the Van Landingham Glen at the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens. And that's a wonderful place and so very accessible. And then there's the terrace, the Mellichamp Terrace. So if you want to start there, the Botanical Gardens at UNC Charlotte are also a wonderful place to see wildflowers. Amy Tipton is also going to be speaking to our group on our next Zoom meeting on April 11th. And her topic is What the Bees See, How Native Plants Attract Pollinators. So we'll get that registration link out to you, and we all look forward to that. So thank you, Laura. Our meeting has been recorded, and we will send you a link to that once we get that posted on YouTube.